Hello everyone, and welcome to Board on a Shelf. I'm Antonio, and today we are going to be filming the top 5 games of 2024 with Trace, Trevor, and Rory. This is taking place at Empire Board Game Library here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So with that, I'm going to let the other guys take over and share with you their top games of the year.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Trace.
I'm Trevor.
And I'm Rory.
Today we're going to be doing our top 5 games of 2024.
So, before we get into it, I had some criteria on games to exclude games.
Okay.
So, I wasn't going to do any expansions.
Right.
So, like, Heat was out even though heavy rain came. But also, I had games that were re-implementations or new additions that I excluded. Because otherwise, my list probably would have been Skyrise, Brussels, Finca, stuff like that. And I was like, no, let me cut all those out and just do new games.
Yeah, I took all those off. My potentials as well.
And I almost just did 5 De Beer games. I think they had a very good year last year, but I decided just to, put one on the list.
Empire is a board game cafe with a 1,000-game library located in Nob Hill. We are coming up on our 10th anniversary, which is amazing. We serve a full menu. We have desserts. We have espresso bar. Everyone that works here demos these games to customers.
Yeah, there's a lot of games here, so we make recommendations and we can teach a lot of these games at the table.
So, for my number 5 game of 2024, one of the other criteria I was looking at a lot was games that were released in 2024 that were available for us to play.
Right.
There were a lot of games I was looking at. I think I played about 20 games that were released in 2024 according to BGG, and there were about 14 that were late 2023. I didn't end up including any of those just because they didn't actually make the top 5. But my number 5 is a little bit of a cheat because according to BGG, it's released in 2025.
I wonder what game this is going to be.
I wonder which game it is. It is the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring trick-taking game.
Well, here's what's special, and it qualifies for 24, is that we were on a special program that allowed us to get it early.
Right, so it released at PAX Unplugged, and we got it at release date, so we were able to play it a little bit early, which is unusual for us, but very cool. So this made my top 5. I think it might be higher if I get to play it more. I've only played about the first 5 chapters of this, and I really like games like this. Cooperative games that have some kind of hidden information, things like Hanabi or The Crew. This takes a lot of cues from The Crew, which is one of my favorite cooperative games. So this one was really cool, and I'm super excited to play more of it and see what unfolds throughout the story and stuff of it.
I also really like trick-taking games, and if I had played more than the first 2 chapters, this would probably be on my list as well. In fact, we were talking about we might play this on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Well, also one of my all-time favorite games is Teach You.
Mm-hmm.
And I love trick-taking card games. I haven't had a chance to play this, but I'm very much looking forward to playing this one.
It's really neat. Oh, speaking of excluding things, so we get very busy during the holiday season, so we have not had a chance to play any of the late releases, so don't expect to see Arcs, or Civolution, or Daitashi, or anything that came out, late November through December. So these are all going to be mid to mid-late 2024 picks, and some of them from the future.
Some of them from the future.
We got some preview copies because we ran an event that we taught people how to play. So that's why we have this and we're able to play it a bunch.
And one of the benefits of working in a game store is that we get to play a lot of games, except for during the holiday season. But we meet every Wednesday and play a new game almost every week, unless it's just too busy to play games.
Yeah.
And that's where we get most of our gameplays, at least in the shop.
Doing the count to get a list for this video, I played about 85 different games last year.
I played overall last year, not just new games, I played 104 different games last year.
All right, my number 5 is, try to set up Cities. Just a little city building game, kind of worker placement. I really enjoy, it's cute, but it's also a theme that I like in general. And I think it's just a game of neat little choices. On your turn, you'll send one of your guys out to a spot on the board, and get whatever is there. But it's got 4 different things to collect, and you only get 1 thing from each row. So there's a lot of choices in like, oh, I really want this, but if I don't get this now, I'm not going to be able to get this, and have to like take a lot of second and third choices, which I think is interesting.
I haven't had a chance to play this one.
I think I'm the only one who's played this.
I've played it a couple times, actually. I think I would like it more if I had the opportunity to play it at a higher player count. I only played it at 2. I've played it a couple times at 2, and I didn't like it as much at 2. I thought it was just directly could be very mean, which isn't something I'm into in games, because there's only one other person doing stuff, and you can very much block people out of doing the thing they want to do.
I will agree with that. This would probably be higher because I don't really like it at 2.
Yeah.
I think at 3 and 4, especially 4, I think it's really neat.
Number 5.
His surprise pick.
Uh-huh.
This is a surprise pick.
I see.
We're doing this by complexity, right?
I still this so far, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so my number 5 pick is kind of a surprise because it's Wilmot's Warehouse. I typically don't really play too much cooperative games. I absolutely don't feel like I'm very successful in memory games. And this one was a really big surprise on the table for all of us, I feel like, because Eugene, who's not here today, also liked it a lot. And this is definitely not in his zone of games. All of us pretty much play pretty heavy games in general.
There's a pretty good chance that you're unfamiliar with Wilmot's Warehouse. Thematically, everyone playing are employees at a warehouse. You will sort incoming goods, and then at the end of the game, have to remember where everything is. Those goods are just little tiles that look like what's here on the front of the box. But what you'll do is you'll get a tile, and then show it to everyone. You'll decide what it is, place it on the board, put it face down. The way you remember things is you kind of create a little story. Like when we played our first game, we built a guy. We're like, oh, what is this? Oh, that's right, that was his shoe. Oh, he was holding this in that hand, and it made it very easy at the end, despite having 35 tiles to remember where everything was.
Yeah, and the other one too is that this one is really, really easy to get to the table for the customers. The rules are very simple in it, and it's really what blew me away was I don't remember how many tiles we had to memorize. How many was
35.
that? 35. And I think we got 33, right? It only missed 2 tiles out of 35 tiles.
I think so.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Very impressed. Whoever did this one did a great job.
Yeah, I was really surprised by this one also. When I was told the theme of it and stuff, I was like, that sounds dumb, and I don't want to play this at all. But we played it, and I thought it was going to be too light, but it ended up being a lot of fun. The little tasks that it gives you each day that kind of put a wrinkle in what you can do with the tiles and what you can say added a lot to the game. And it makes it a really entertaining game to watch other people play also. I've taught this to several groups, and just listening to the leaps they make in their stories of how this thing forms is really entertaining, because every single game there's some story going on, and you're like, how does that make sense to anybody? But it helps you remember.
I think one of the things that jumped out at me on this one was, so on your turn, you're the warehouse manager. So you're, like you said, you're tasked to do different things as the manager. One of my favorite ones was when you're supposed to put your thumb over the picture of the tile, and then everybody makes up a story. And I was like, how are we going to remember this?
When you only see half the tile.
3/4 of it's covered by your thumb, and you're trying to figure out a story to go with that. It's pretty good.
Cool. So my number 4 game is going to be Wormspan. For people that are familiar with games at all, almost, you'll know Wingspan. This is the Dragon Edition. I was pleasantly surprised that it's not just a reskinning of Wingspan. It is very much its own game and has a lot of unique stuff to it going on. I really like Wingspan, but I like Wormspan more. Wingspan I've played so many times, it can feel very formulaic almost, with what you need to do to score a lot of points. And maybe it's just the newness of Wormspan, but I don't feel that way. There's a lot of different things going on and different ways to score in this one. And maybe, like I said, it's just because I haven't played it as much, so I don't know it as well. But everything feels very fresh. I liked the cave system of opening up the caves before you put your dragons in there and getting things for opening up those spots. I really liked, well, the aesthetics, because the game is gorgeous. And dragons are much cooler than birds. But that's obviously a me thing.
I am very mild on Wingspan. I'm pretty vocal about that. I also like Wormspan. Didn't quite make my list, but I think it's a very good re-implementation and like refinement of kind of the Wingspan system. The card abilities are just pared down to 4 different triggers. It's easy to know when your cards activate and what they do. It's all very standardized, which I liked quite a bit. It really rewards clever play. Your actions are a resource that you can spend extra of and gain extra of if you play your cards right, which I really like.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite things about this one is the action system, that you get your 6 coins to do your actions at the beginning of the round, but you can gain coins to gain extra actions, or you can spend those coins to get better dragons, giving up actions to get cooler stuff. Every game that I've seen of this and played of it has kind of a ramping up in the first and second round, and then in the third round there's just this explosion of turns where you feel like you can do
just doing so much stuff,
everything, because you have so many actions and turns. And then in the fourth round you kind of condense back down and focus on what's important for your game, and it kind of wraps up really nicely.
That's a really good thing. Yeah, I think part of my problem with Wingspan is the engine building a lot of time feels a little arbitrary. Like not never, but a lot of times I'm like, I kind of have this thing going that kind of works. In my games of Wormspan, I've been able to like see a card and be like, I know where this fits in the engine I'm building, or it doesn't. Just get it out of here and be able to, by the third round, you're really doing a lot of clever stuff.
Yeah.
So on a historical note, talking about Wingspan, coming from a point of view from a retail store, when we first opened in 2015, Splendor was hands down, no question about it, the #1 selling game for at least 4 years. And then we thought that nothing would ever surpass the sales of that game because it was kind of like the first mega game that brought people to the store. Wingspan probably doubled the sales of Splendor, which was incredible. And we sold so many copies of Wingspan, I was concerned about Wormspan coming out thinking like, gosh, everybody was so obsessed with Wingspan. Is this really going to catch? But it's actually done very well. It's been a very good seller. It's been on the table constantly, and it's different enough for people to want both.
All right, here's my wild card pick. It is Rock Hard, 1977. When reading the rules, I was kind of mild on it. Like, mechanically, this does not have a lot of interesting stuff going on. You put your worker somewhere, you get money, or raise some stats, or whatever. But the production and the theme on it are done really well. This is a game that's less about what you're doing mechanically and more about the feel of replicating the feel of going from a nobody and trying to become a rising star in the 1970s rock world. It's got a ton of randomness. You can gain bonuses like candy and spend them and maybe do nothing. At night you can go hang out, maybe something nice happens, maybe nothing happens. When we first played it, I had a problem with it because that's kind of stuff I don't like in games. However, when we were done, we were talking with Eugene, a colleague of ours, that I was talking to about it, and he's like, well, that's kind of the point of the game. And so I thought about it, and I came at it from a different direction, and it is. The idea is that I spent my morning working, the afternoon at a gig, and then late at night went to a club just hoping to get seen or meet somebody famous or whatever, and nothing happened. Your player boards are amps with plastic knobs. They go up to 11. The paper money in this, I don't think I would ever say paper money in a game is a positive, but the paper and money in this are like real dollars. So when you earn money and you spend money, it feels like you're earning and spending money. Anyway, this is kind of not a game I'm sure I would go back to very often, but it's a very interesting game.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most like play for the theme kind of games that I've played in a long time. That it does, like, when you're doing stuff in the game, it can like make you feel cool. Like you're like, oh, I'm playing like this big venue before everyone else kind of stuff. And that makes you feel, it's a feel good kind of game. Spending candy and sometimes it doing nothing, that felt bad the first time it happened to me. From a gameplay standpoint, I was like, oh, I'm thinking about action economy and all this stuff. But by the end of the game, I was like, oh, that doesn't matter. This is a fun game.
That was the one example.
Yeah,
that was like,
sometimes that's weird for us to play a fun game that, this game is just enjoyable. It doesn't have to be the most mechanically unique thing in the world.
Which this is definitely not.
All right.
We'll eventually pick some games you have played.
I don't even like Wingspan. All right, so
now you're just copying me.
my number 4, following a theme of DeVere games, I will say that DeVere has knocked it out of the park this year with their games, is Salton Sea. I thought it was incredible. There is a ton of game in this box. It is very it's a pretty heavy game. There's a lot going on. You're basically mining, sea mining.
You've got to do things like maintain your equipment. As you drill, your drills will get worn out. You have to upgrade them, maintain them, replace them. You've got workers to worry about. It's got multi-use cards. Your cards are your actions, but also your currency. So there's a real difficult balance you have to strike between things you want to do and things you need to buy.
Yeah, I also liked the actions on the cards, that all of them were just clearly like better versions of things that were already on your board.
Yes.
So you were never like out of options. You could get better versions, but you could always do the basic version of something because it's on your own player board and nobody can block you out of doing that. So you can always do the basic version of things, but do cooler things if you get the cards to do so.
And as you build your hand of cards and upgrade your player board and stuff, it feels real good later in the game when you're doing a lot of things and making big moves.
Yeah, the decision making in it of when to spend your cards and which cards you want to spend was really tight, because there's no change in the game also. So you have cards that are 5s, 3s, and 1s, and each of them is a better version of the actions, but that's also your monetary amounts. So if you spend a 5, you're spending potentially a really good action.
The other thing I think is kind of interesting about it, it is in a very small box. Once this game gets out on the table, it fills the whole table.
If you are unfamiliar with DeVere's what we call small box series, this and Red Cathedral and White Castle and Bamboo and whatever else, they're small boxes, but they're not small games.
No, in fact, your brains will be melting out of your ears when you're finished with this one.
Like I don't know if the camera's going to pick this up, but the game barely fits in the box.
Yeah, and if you pick that game up, it's probably heavier than this one.
Yeah. It's densely packed little
Salton
box.
Sea, hitting number 4,
Cool.
DeVere games.
So my number 3 game is Gnar. This is kind of an engine building game where you are playing cards to get resources and then using those resources to score points. This does it in a very unique way, though. It's a race game. First 1 to 40 points wins. There are not direct resources that you spend, but your cards produce things that can help you out along the way. Your cards can produce points, they can produce reputation, which gets you passive points, and they can produce recruits and goods that help you trade for more stuff, or use your recruits to go on expeditions as well. The thing I really like about this is it's not a straight up engine builder game, because you also have to tear your engine apart multiple times throughout the game. I really like this build up, and then you have to decide what to sacrifice, because you have to spend your cards to go on these expeditions, which are going to be the things that get you the most points. The first few turns, you're really focused on, okay, this combos together with this combos together with this gets me a bunch of stuff. And then about halfway through the game, you have to go, okay, I can keep putting stuff out there, or I can get rid of all my stuff to take these expeditions and basically start over. I really like the cyclical nature of it, rather than just one big ramp up to the end. And when you make those decisions of like when to tear down your stuff, feels really good. Seeing what everyone else is doing and seeing their engines sometimes at the same time doing the same thing. I really liked the flow of this game. It was really unique.
Similar to what you talked about with cities, I think this probably would have made the cut if I had played it at more than 2 people.
Yeah.
It's a game with a kind of a market of cards, and at 2 people it doesn't necessarily move, and I just would like to play it at 3 or 4. But I also like everything that you said. Absolutely. If you haven't played this, you absolutely should. Oh, another game you haven't played?
It's another game I haven't played.
Oh man,
It's too small of a box for me to get interested in. Too light.
I think you would actually like this.
I looked through the list of games that we played together, and then I didn't include any of those on my list.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
I'm like, let's make sure I don't overlap with Rory at all.
This is why I needed you in here. So
I was actually really, honestly, I was really surprised because there was really no buzz on that. You liked it a lot.
It's really
cool. I probably would have passed on this if Galen hadn't showed it to me.
Yeah, this is one that Galen and I played, and then Rachel and I played, and both of them just immediately bought it afterwards, so I didn't get a copy of this because they bought both of them. So this is the only game on my list that I couldn't immediately buy.
We'll have to get that back in stock.
Yeah, we could even put that on a list. It's not a difficult game to teach.
Yeah, I just told you have a sale, so.
I also picked a small box game. Hegemony, lead your class to victory. This is a game of class warfare. It's a asymmetric economic warfare game. There is a lot going on in this box, and I think it would be higher if it didn't have such a high bar to entry. It plays best at 4, and every person's game works differently. It's almost like 4 people are kind of playing different games on the same board. And so you need to not just understand how your stuff works and what your victory conditions are, but how everything works. It can be tough, and it can be tough to find a group who's willing to put in that effort. But if you can, it's super neat. There is a very large legislative part of the game where you're introducing bills and then voting on them that have major effects. You can crash the economy. The working class can go on strike and just shut down the capitalist class. It's got a real neat push and pull in 4 ways with all the classes. But if this sounds interesting and you've got a group willing to learn it, you should absolutely play it.
Yeah, I think we'll be talking more about this game in a bit. I think it's incredible that there is some negotiations in this game, but I wouldn't call them negotiations. It's more like letting other people know what's available in your faction and trying to like kind of lead them into your direction without really like saying you should buy this or you should take part in this. But you could suggest like, hey, if you open up a company, it could be worth it for us. And I think that the push-pull mechanic is fantastic, and I think that 3 out of the 4 factions could win no matter what. I feel like the government faction is the one that I would like to see somebody win on that one, but I feel like that's a difficult one to win on. But the working class, the capitalists, the middle class can all take the game. Yeah,
and there is negotiation, and you can like sort of soft leverage your power. Like I mentioned, the working class being able to strike. You don't have to go on strike in order to leverage that. You can just be like, raise wages or I'm going to go on strike. Like, just the threat of being able to do it.
Yeah, I think the game is amazing. And I was really good at it.
That's why it's so low on my list.
That's important. That's always important.
Yeah. I'm actually very bad at this game. What's your number 3?
My number 3, I'm sure this is going to be a very popular vote. Barely making it into 24 is going to be SETI. I thought SETI was absolutely amazing. I think there's going to be lots of terraforming Mars people getting right onto this game. It's a game of space exploration and discovering planets and getting resources off planet. But what makes this game really, really incredible is when you discover the alien life in different places, and every alien life that you discover comes with its own set of rules, which I think is really amazing in this one. The other thing I like about this one is it's really hard to get any kind of resources, and it's very difficult in this game. So every little, you just feel like you're just pinching for the smallest amount of resources in order to get what you need to get accomplished, and it just feels like everything's so far away. It feels very much like being out in space with very little resources to get around in. What was your take on it?
Yeah, this is one that might have made my list if I were able to play it a little more. I only played it the one time, and I was very distracted during the game because I was working the whole time we were playing, and I never really got to see anybody else's turn. I would walk away from the table, do some stuff, come back, and be like, okay, here's my turn. I gotta go work. I really enjoyed it from what I got out of it, and yeah, I really like the not knowing which aliens are going to come up, because out of the 5, you choose 2 of them randomly and put them face down, and then you discover them throughout the game. And it being our first game, we didn't look at any of the aliens going into it, which is what it seems like a lot of people do. So when we discovered the first ones, we're like, oh, okay, how does this work? How does this affect the game? And it was really cool discovering the new stuff that came out.
When Tress played this one, we decided to play on Christmas Eve during the day, which is pretty typically a pretty slow day with people coming in here and there and buying retail games for Christmas last minute kind of thing, but not this year.
It wasn't slow.
This year was not slow at all. And actually Tress won the game, which was very impressive because Andres and I had tons and tons of time to analytically dissect everything we were doing, and we still lost. So anyway, still making my number 3.
Even though you lost.
And I'm going to come back and talk about this game a little bit more later.
Cool. So my number 2 is Let's Go to Japan. I really like this game. It came out right when I was planning a trip to Japan, so it was kind of perfect timing, because that's what the entire game is you are playing cards to your different days of a week and planning out your trip to Japan. You use cards from 2 different decks, Kyoto and Tokyo, and you see all the sites. The main part of the game is tags. There's tags on all the cards that correspond to a few different things you can do or see while you're in Japan. Things like sakura blossoms or shrines or conversation and things like that. You're playing the cards to get tags to match specific days is one of the big things to get some bonuses. But once you play 3 cards to each of the days, the game is over. And then you go on your trip, and that's where all the scoring for the game happens. You go day by day, checking your tags, and whatever card you have on top of your stack will have some requirements at the bottom, and you see if you met those requirements so far in your trip. It's a card drafting game. It tells you when to take cards from which decks, and you take 1, pass 1, or you'll take 2, pass 2. I just really liked the balance of everything and how it feels at the end. And when you get to the end of the game and everyone goes on their trip and you go through, oh, today I went to sumo wrestling, and then I went and ate at this ramen restaurant, and then I went and saw this shrine, and each person kind of actually explaining like how their trip goes, and you're like, oh, that sounds awesome.
When people are curious about it, I like to tell them it's an engine building game that you're going to spend the whole game building your engine and run it once, which is really neat. There are a couple of things didn't mention. Your trip includes Tokyo and Kyoto, and so if you're switching between cities, you also have to manage train rides. It's got a lot of neat bonuses for sticking to the day's theme. You can do whatever you want, but if you are able to kind of like cleverly get your cards in the right order, you can really kind of combo some bonuses off of that. Didn't make my list just because it's not really my style of game, but I have played it a couple of times and enjoyed it.
Yeah, the one other thing I really liked about it was when you're drafting cards, you can place them normally, or you can decide to go for a walk on a day, which I thought was really cool, which is you just take a random card and put it face down, and when you actually go on the trip, then you flip the card over and see what happened. So you're like, I'm not going to plan anything for this part of the day, but when it gets to it, I'll just walk around and see what happens. And I thought that was a really cool, like, thematic thing that also gave you more flexibility if you just got cards that you didn't
absolutely
that nothing worked for you. Yeah. Then you still have some options.
You know what I liked about it? I liked how the in-game scoring was very interesting because you couldn't follow the game. You didn't know where everybody was at during the game, and you felt incredibly clever when you're taking the cards. You're putting things together, you're making combos, and you're thinking to yourself, I'm killing it on this game. But then you go to the in-game scoring and you realize, maybe not so much.
Yeah,
but it was I really liked it because it was nice build up, and it wasn't like one of those ones where you're watching the score as you go. It all happens at the end, which makes it a different kind of experience in a board game.
Yeah, and I like that it's a drafting game that you really focus on your own stuff. You are very rarely looking at like what other people need because you have no idea for most of the game.
Yeah.
Kind of. I like to see like, oh, you've been going to Tokyo a lot. I'm just going to keep giving you Tokyo cards, and then about like the last third of the game, we're going to switch over. You only give you Kyoto cards.
Yeah, that's one thing you can do. It like give somebody a specific
and
city.
Really make them lose some points on train rides.
But there was some mitigation for that too, with like the research tokens that you can get.
Oh yeah, you can
absolutely going
mitigate it.
Walks. So
now I would also call it a medium weight game, but your second play is going to be a lot better than your first play kind of a game, because your first time playing through is a lot of discovery with the in-game scoring, like I'd said before, and
that is true. It's not really like anything else I've played.
Yeah. This is one that I really, really like showing people, but it is very hard to teach because you have to understand everything that's going on in the game and the scoring before you can even start the game.
All right, my number 2 is, I don't know, Brass Squared. I went with Nucleum, a kind of industrial revolution except with nuclear power themed game. It's got a lot of similarities with Brass, Birmingham, or Brass, a game you may have heard of. Except when you're laying your tracks in order to build your network, you are permanently giving up one of your action tiles. And if you're not careful, you can give up some tiles that you need. It's really neat. It is extremely heavy. It's very interconnected, but if you want a game with a lot going on, that it's also a lot of player interaction, this is a good one. Every decision you make affects everybody, and you've got to know what everyone's doing so that you don't accidentally help somebody while trying to help yourself. It's a game where the pressure is on the entire time, from your very first move till the end of the game. I don't know. If you want a stressful game that is extremely heavy, but also makes you feel very clever when you're able to do things, Nucleum is very good.
Yeah, I agree. Getting the resources to run your trains is incredibly difficult. You're dealing with spending money to get coal, or you're dealing with building up a nuclear plant to produce plutonium, right?
Well, to produce power off of uranium.
Yeah, uranium power, right? It's very good. This is once you play this, then if you want to get into something very, very light, you can just play Brass.
It is funny how we played Brass after playing this and how much lighter Brass feels.
The similarities of the two are they're very similar games in some regards. And I couldn't think of what my number 2 was on my games, so I decided just to copy Trevor on my number 2 game, which is Nucleum, which we were just talking about. Definitely hit one of my favorite games of this entire year. We have, I don't know how many plays we have on. How many plays do we have on this now?
I think I've got 4.
And it's a game that you can't invite people to play for the first time once you've played a couple of times, so they'll just literally get smoked off the table. It is definitely one of those games where the rules overhead is heavy. It's not one that you can just kind of go with the flow and kind of pick up things as you go. There's a lot of connection. It's difficult to understand how the connections work. Where in brass, the connections are pretty straightforward. This one, you can trace the connection across the entire board. So there's a lot going on in Nucleum, and I think it's fantastic. I think it's definitely one of my favorite games of all time.
Part of the complexity, but also part of the enjoyment is it's very kind of sandboxy. There's not a definite progression that you're going to go through. Just from action 1, you can do pretty much whatever you can afford to do. You don't have to like build this in order to build this in order to build this. You can just start off with your most expensive building if you really want to. But with that comes a lot of analysis and decision making. And it can be very tough, like Rory said, to sit and learn a lot of rules and then immediately have to start making like game defining decisions.
And another thing that's really fun about this game is that you can start in the wrong place and you will never come back. Like, it's got a lot going on. So when we played our third game, or we had somebody new at the table, we were like, don't start there.
Yeah.
Like, don't even go there, because you're gonna have 3.5, 4 hours of misery.
Yeah, I only played this one twice, and I think it's funny that you're like, man, I played this 4 times this year. That's a lot for us.
That is a lot.
We play so many different games that playing something 4 times is a lot for us in a year. I definitely fell into the trap of playing my little routes out and completely eliminating the possibility of doing one of the actions, and it took me like 4 or 5 turns before I could get access to that action again. So you definitely can mess up badly at the start of this game. I ended up coming back and doing okay. It is possible to recover. I also really liked that there's different avenues you could like heavily focus on. You can really focus on getting your buildings out there. You can focus on getting your reactors and things like that out there to be producing. Or you can do, your network, or you could do like the technology tree thing on the side. I really like that you can really focus heavily, but you have to do something of everything.
And that's something I forgot. It is sort of asymmetric.
Yeah.
Speaking of the technologies, everyone's going to be dealt a different sort of technology tree that doesn't have to, but you probably should let it direct how your game is going to go.
Yeah.
Because everyone's going to have bonuses in different areas. And so you can fight against it, but if you want to have a good game, you just kind of be like, okay, this is the game I'm going to play this game.
And in something this heavy that is very sandboxy, I love that your thing gives you a little bit of direction at the start.
Mm-hmm.
I love games that do that. Be like, okay, if I focus on this, I can at least do okay. I hate going into like a really heavy game being like, you can do anything. Well, I don't know what to do now.
Or like, I really like Lost Ruins of Arnak, but the base game, where it is not asymmetric,
right?
Everyone's needs to do the same thing at the same time.
Yeah,
which is another problem with this doesn't have.
Once you play a few times and you're like, okay, this is what I should be doing in the first few turns. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to do that.
Yeah.
So I like that the little tech trees give you a little bit of direction, so you're not all trying to do the same thing at once.
And then I also one thing that you can't do in this game is ignore the end of round scoring track, which I attempted to do in one game to concentrate on some other things, which I thought were very successful. It's not successful. And that's the other thing about Nucleum. I like it's one of those games that I have not won. I don't even know if I've gotten third yet. Maybe I've gotten third, but it's one that I want to get back on the table, and it's one that I have a ton of fun, win or lose. It's a great game.
And that's our video on Nucleum. What are you looking for?
Game.
Harmonies? Hegemony?
Harmonies? Oh, yeah.
Wilmots?
I got mine right here.
Heavy Harmonies.
Harmonies.
Oh, you did pick Harmonies?
The
for
only
number
game
one?
that's all left over there.
I just brought it over to talk about. It's the game that everyone's going to choose that we're not going to be choosing as number one.
Oh, okay. Well, my number one.
Well, we didn't.
My number one game is Harmonies. I really, really like this. I just love the simplicity of playing this game and how brutal it is for actually getting your stuff to work. It's a game where you take little tiles from a display and you're placing them into your own habitat. And you're using the different terrains to both score points for the terrains, and you are taking these animal cards from a display, and your animals want very specific configurations of your terrains. There are some animals that can kind of cohabitat, as in their terrains will overlap a little bit, and that's where you're going to be getting the best synergies and things like that if you can find things to make that work. I love how in this you can start with your open board and you're like, okay, I'm going to go for water. This is my first thing. I'm going to do otters this time. And I'm going to put all this water on my board. I do a couple otters and then I never see another water tile. And it's the most frustrating thing in the world. I love it. And your habitat just evolves throughout the game and you have to make very tough decisions because you have to use all the tiles you take every turn. And you don't always get the things that you want.
Yeah, to get something you want, you might have to take something you do not want.
Yeah, and you're like, I guess I'm going to start making a tree over here. We'll see if I get anything that does anything with trees.
So I didn't play Harmonies, but I do like tile laying games. So I need to give this one a shot. I'm very familiar with it. I've taught it, I don't know, a lot, but have not actually had a chance to sit down and play it.
I think that I'm just going to put it out there. I think Harmonies is going to win the Spiel des Jahres this year. I think it's really accessible to the table to a lot of people. I think that the gameplay while you're playing, you feel very clever, and the combinations of things that you put together, you know, it's a really, really well thought out game. That the design is excellent. I think it's right there with Cascadia. I think it's going to win Spiel des Jahres.
Yeah, it fits right there in a space of games that I love that are fairly quick to play. It's probably like 25-30 minutes, and you want to play again just right away. It's easy to grasp. You take your tiles, maybe you take an animal, and that's your whole turn. So playing the game is very easy, but doing well can be difficult, which is a space that I love.
And coming from a game store point of view, if that game is on the table and gets a demo, it's most likely going to get purchased if it's available. Same with Wilmot's Warehouse. It was one of those incredible games through the holiday season where if a customer played it, they were going to buy it. It was just that kind of a catchy style of game that was just easy for the customers and easy for the demo. It's just a really good fit.
Yeah, I've had that happen quite a few times where I show somebody this game and after the game they're like, I have to have this. Because you can see yourself just playing it over and over.
Yeah, it's got very little setup.
Mm-hmm.
Fairly easy to teach. Visually, it's very clear how things score, what you need, and how to do it.
Also, the game is gorgeous.
Yep.
All the card art is
100%.
absolutely beautiful.
Pieces are great.
Yeah.
Once you finish your game, it looks amazing.
The tiles do feel good.
Yeah, and the stacking aspect helps it a lot too, because it looks cool on the table when you have your terrain and you have like this is my mountain, this is my tree over here, and it looks very nice.
And that would have been on my top 5 games this year, but I thought that's going to be in everybody's top game, so I wanted to get out of the box.
Rory's a real hipster when it comes to top games.
Yeah, really
2024.
Yeah.
We're always saying that. All right.
Oh,
my number one is SETI. This is a search for extraterrestrial intelligence. We talked about it a little bit, but I had some stuff to say that I decided to save so I could say it now. This is typically not my type of game. It is kind of an action selection, but also like cards that you can play. They give you better versions of actions and stuff that will kind of dictate the route you take in the game. But there's a few things that I really like about this. and I'm surprised no one mentioned earlier, but the center of the game is the solar system. And it's you have the base board, and on top of that is 3 stacking, sort of interlocking boards represent the inner and outer solar system, and they all turn at certain points in the game. You'll be sending out probes to try and get to certain planets, and anticipating and managing the spin of the solar system is really rewarding and or devastating. It looks really neat, and it has a really interesting effect on gameplay. If I want to send a probe to Jupiter, I might fire it off in the opposite direction, knowing that by the time it gets out there, my probe's just going to ride gravity around to the planet. Also, talked a little bit, spoilers, you do find aliens. They both have a profound impact on the game, but also it's really interesting how the alien races you find change the game, change what you need to do, but also don't necessarily change the focus of what you're already doing. You do things like scanning stars and sending probes to planets and stuff like that. Before the game, Rory was talking about, oh man, this was everyone's focus on the first game I played. We did it a bunch. It was very important. The game we played, almost nobody did it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And then my second game, almost like strangely, like there were almost no orbiters around planets and stuff like that. So it's each game is kind of the same, but is also very different based on what kind of stuff you get and what alien races come out. I find it fascinating.
And I think I also like the mechanic of finding the alien races and how important it is for everybody to be involved in that discovery, because if you are not involved, you really miss out on a lot of things, which feels really true to alien discovery.
Yeah, and after the alien races are discovered, there's more things to do concerning those aliens, but there is a very intense race on being part of the initial discovery.
One of the things, so I didn't mention the spinning of the planets and all that because it was something I almost completely ignored in the first game that I played. Because
you didn't see it.
Exactly, yeah. I was talking about I was working while I was doing it. So I was like, okay, all of this is going to change by the time I get back, so I'm just not going to send probes. I'm not going to do that. I had my first one, and then in like the second to last turn or something, I sent a probe just so I could get to a specific planet for a specific goal I had. But I was like, I'm going to ignore all that, but that was cool that I had that option. And I just focused on card play, because sending the probes is really expensive and resources are very tight. And you also need that money to play your cards. So I focused on just playing cards and trying to get what I needed out of that. The other two at the table had a lot of cards that let them send probes better. And I never got any of those, so I just kind of ignored that aspect of the game because I didn't want to pay the full price to just send a probe. I think it's really cool how all the different action types, how good they are, can very much change depending on how much other people are also doing those things. Because like with the scanning, if somebody else is also scanning, it's better for you to do scanning too, to get into those for some majorities, and it gets those data cubes cleared quicker so you can start the process again.
Yeah, and I think that this also has a lot of replayability, as we were talking about. There's so many different paths. Like, I can't wait to play it again so I can try a scanning strategy.
Yeah, and it's set up easily for expansions. Like, I mean, just selling different alien race packs, that's easy.
Yeah, I think SETI's going to be around for a long time. I think it's going to be on the table, kind of like Terraforming Mars. I think it's going to be a very popular game.
Oh yeah, I started to mention that. Like, I don't really like games with big decks of cards that necessitate a lot of things, like Terraforming Mars or Ark Nova. Not my style of games, and this really surprised me. I wound up enjoying this quite a bit.
And my number one is no surprise, and it's not because I've won 3 out of 5 games, but it is Hegemony. yeah. I think this game is incredible. It's a war game, but it doesn't feel like a war game in a traditional war game sense, but it definitely is that. It's a card-driven style war game. And I just think that the different classes and the asymmetric gameplay of the different players is just really flows incredibly well. And what makes this really a unique game compared to other coin games, GMT coin games, is it's incredibly important to know exactly what everybody's abilities are. In fact, it's the key to the game, is to understand why people are taking the turns and doing what they're doing on their actions, and how can you do your action that's going to benefit them in the near future, or how you can suggest maybe they think about going into this direction to benefit you and benefit them, but the reality is you're just trying to benefit yourself.
And I didn't mention this earlier because I wanted to save something because I knew this is going to be Rory's number one. Is that it is asymmetric, and everyone needs to understand how everything works, not just so you can know how everyone gets points or what they're looking for, but everything you do is connected to the other classes. The capitalists have the businesses, but the working class have the workers. Without those workers, the capitalists can't do anything. And without those businesses, the working class can't feed their people.
The feeding is brutal.
So it's very, very interconnected. Everything you do affects everybody else, like everything you do.
Yeah, in fact, the feeding mechanics is really rough because corporate builds the businesses and the working class builds the farms and businesses that produce the food, but the working class has to buy that food after they produce it. So that's why it's really beneficial at some point for a strike, because it's like you're taking all of our money and we're not getting enough food, and you're making too much money. So I don't know. This game's incredible. This really is my favorite game of the year, no doubt.
And this is one of the ones that I wish I had gotten a chance to play. I was just never able to find the time to play it, unfortunately. I love asymmetric games like that, where you have to know everything going on. It seems like exactly my type of game. I just never found the time to play it, unfortunately.
I find it exhausting, but it actually doesn't take that much time. It actually moves at a pretty good clip. Like 3 hours would be a long game of it. Like if everyone's played before, you could get done in 2.5 hours.
Yep.
That was our top 5. I'm Trace.
Thank you for joining us here on Board on a Shelf for our top picks of 2024. I'm Trevor.
I hope I did okay on this. This is not normally my cup of tea to do videos, and
because we normally have espresso.
I hope you guys liked our picks, and if you live in Albuquerque, I hope that you come to Empire and come try out some of these games, because here's what's great about Empire. We're not going to teach you this game because it's too heavy, but we will help you once you've learned some of the rules. But we will teach this game to anybody that walks through the door.
I will absolutely teach this game.
Can teach this game as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you disagree with our picks, be sure to comment. I will definitely read them.
Okay, thank you everyone for watching. That was the top 5 games of 2024, specifically shot here at Empire Board Game Library. And please let us know your top games of the year. And if you disagree with any of our games, let us know in the comments, and please like and subscribe. Thanks for supporting. Bye.